The podcast you're about to hear is a conversation with Emanuel Congregation President Leah Jones in conversation with Emanuel's Senior Rabbi, Rabbi Craig Marantz, as well as Emanuel's Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Michael Zedek. The podcast contains archival audio of Rabbi Felix Levy, may his memory be for a blessing, as well as from Rabbi Herman Schaalman, may his memory also be for a blessing. That archival audio is part of a tribute recording that exists because of Emanuel member Sam Segi. With gratitude to Sam, here's the opening of the original audio that explains more.
This tape recording contains highlights of the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services of the year 1985, corresponding to the Hebrew year 5746. It is primarily significant in that it is Rabbi Herman Schaalman's final High Holy Day service as the senior rabbi of the Emanuel Congregation, concluding a span of 31 plus years in that role. That this recording was made at all is due in major measure to the instigation and the persistence of a young man, a second-generation member of the Emanuel Congregation, Sam Segi. Sam loves music, and he loves Rabbi Shaman, and to his mind there could be no greater tribute than a tape combining both of these loves. With his foot in a cast as Rosh Hashanah 1985 began, Sam prevailed on others to oversee the actual taping of the services, and together with Cantor Howard Tushman, he began the long and arduous task of editing 15 hours of tape down to the 90 minutes or so that are on this tape. The story of the binding of Isaac, the lovely Kol Nidre, Rabbi Schaalman's breaking a 31-year-old tradition with his sermon on Yom Kippur Eve, the haunting final notes of the shofar as Yom Kippur ends, and much more, are captured here for you for years to come. Whatever may be lacking in technical professionalism in the recording you are about to hear is more than made up for by the care and the tenderness with which it was conceived and produced. Sam and his committee, the Sam Segi Tape Tribute Committee, trust that you will enjoy the memories that this tape will foster when you listen to the words of Rabbi Herman Schaalman and the beautiful music of Cantor Howard Tushman and the Emanuel High Holy Day Choir.
Hello and welcome to our High Holy Day podcast. This is an extended sermon. My name is Leah Jones. I am honored to be the president of Emanuel Congregation. And today I am talking with our senior rabbi and our rabbi emeritus. First, I'd like to welcome Rabbi Craig Marantz, who is our senior rabbi.
Shana Tova to you and to our entire congregation. I'm really pleased to be here with you and with Rabbi Zedek. Rabbi Zedek, good to see you. Shana Tova Mituka to you and your family.
The very same all around.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so you've heard his voice, just a blip, but Rabbi Zedek is our Rabbi Emeritus. How are you doing today, Rabbi Zedek?
Well, I managed to be as well as I was when I responded to Rabbi Marantz just a moment ago. In the current environment, my usual response was something like, as far as I know, I'm fine. And I hope the I'm fine part is correct and continues.
Yes, I hear you on that. It is definitely a time for adjusted greetings. The how are you fine and passing is a emptier, different statement today.
Was, yes.
Yeah.
You are indeed fine, Rabbi Zedek.
Thank you very much.
And Leah, my heartfelt thanks to you. You are the tech captain supreme, and what makes this particular technological moment so special is that you are going to help us frame a really important conversation about our community and about this moment and how we can move forward with a greater sense of purpose. I don't think there's anybody I know who has a better feel for our past as an illustrious legacy institution, but also as a true force for good moving forth in the 21st century. I think you really understand the bridge that we can build between those two realities. And so it's really nice to be part of this experience with you as we figure that out together.
Thank you, Rabbi Marantz. Some of the intricacies of bringing High Holy Days to life this year and reimagining how we handle this moment, preparing in advance for a moment, knowing that so many things could change. So I just want to acknowledge we are recording this on the afternoon of September 11th, 2020, We are a week ahead of Rosh Hashanah, and this is also the 19th anniversary of September 11th, 2001. So as we dive into a conversation about this moment in time that we're living in, it is, I think, maybe even made a bit heavier by remembering that moment in time and how it impacted us 19 years ago. But regardless of when you're listening to this, I think a time and place of when we are having this fireside chat is helpful.
Amen. Zichronam livracha, to all those who perished in 9/11. May their memories be for blessing. Not only those who were victims of terror, but those first responders who so bravely sacrificed their lives. We wish ongoing comfort, if at all possible, and healing to those who remember their loved ones.
You know, with the first reflections that Rabbi Marantz shared a moment ago, and you're then pointing out the timing of this actual recording, I'm sure that there's few who were around 9/11 who don't recall where they were when it all happened. Of course, even as I heard this morning, a report of college students off to virtual or real campuses, and they were born after 9/11. So, a shaping experience in many lives is only a historical one, if at most in theirs. But 9/11, which I've never stopped to not recognize, is 911 in terms of the emergency. Is a time when, perhaps unlike our own moment, we did feel a sense of collective wounding and collective purpose going forward. One of the challenges we clearly face nowadays is that we've divided into tribes, into alternative communities, where even if we disagree with the other, that's not the bottom line. The bottom line is not only we disagree, but you're bad, which makes, I suspect, all the more essential why we need communities like Emanuel, a place where people can come together with conviction and safety and embrace, so that 9/11 becomes a memory that ties us together as the historical Jewish memory of our people has always done.
Something that I was thinking about this morning was in my Wexner Heritage Fellowship. One of the conversations we had was about the debates on when Yom HaShoah should be, of when to remember the Holocaust, which was an event that happened over many years, and every day people were murdered. And so is every day Yom HaShoah? Do you remember the loss of the Holocaust every day? Or do you pick an anniversary to center the memorial on? And I think when we look at COVID, we are going to have to, whether it's us as a community, as a congregation, or us as a country, we are going to need a Yom HaKovid, a day to center our mourning, this collective grief. And I think that what September 11th has is it has a moment for collective grief and memory. And then we're able to not move on, but move. And COVID right now seems so unending that we have never stopped to mourn. So I'm going to use that as a transition to ask you each, and I'll start with Rabbi Zedek on this one. How do you think we're going to look back on this moment in history?
Well, the first and obvious response is I have no idea. But a good question deserves more than that as a response, I suspect. And I imagine that if we are to take this experience and find, as it were, the blessing that may be found in this horrifying time, it is that we will somehow reconnect ourselves to the notion of collective experience, not just personal experience. That I with you, not whether you're part of me or not. That would be such a remarkable reestablishment of some of the qualities that animate Judaism for sure, and American culture at its best, without doubt.
Now, Rabbi Marantz, you helped us convene this fireside chat, and I know you have thoughts on this question. So I'm curious, when you zoom out and you think about the future, how do you think we're going to look back on this period of history that we're currently living through?
When I think about looking back, I think of two categories that frame my thinking, one of content and one of method. As it relates to content, and I borrow somewhat from my colleague, Rabbi Nicole Guzik in California, I hope that when we look back about how we survived these tragedies and traumas that mark these times, that we will see a real community, one that has lifted up those among us who have fallen. And I hope that we will see a true community, one that has faced bravely these frightening times. And thirdly, I hope that we will remember that we are a sincere community, one that has stayed in this fight and supported one another, even as our proverbial sky is falling. So that's the content I hope that we will remember, how we will remember. But what about method? We've already been practicing that method every Shabbat. We have congregants who stand up and tell stories. We have staff members that share their lives with us. And we as individuals, we as a community come together and partake in these amazing insights in the Torah of our lives. This extends us beyond the individual experience and brings us to where Rabbi Zedek wants us to go. Some communal understanding of where we stand in all this together. But we have to tell our stories. And lastly, I brought this out in my introductory remarks, the art of tzavua, the art of ethical will. It is absolutely essential for us as we look back that we will have created a method of remembering how it is that we mark these moments, how it is that we trudge through this diversity, how it is that we remain cognizant of the things worth celebrating, the things worth remembering to sustain our 141-year-old legacy. Will we have something that we have created together that brings all the individual experiences into some creative whole that marks this moment and gives us direction when we look back as to understanding from where we've come?
So I think in that question, or in the second comment you made about building an ethical will, I've been thinking a lot about, there's an author in St. Louis, her name is Sarah Kendzior. She's a scholar, an academic expert in authoritarian governments. And one of the things that she has suggested is similar, is writing down everything that you value, from how you live your daily life to what you hold dear in the world, as a way to remember as things change and possibly erode. And I remember at the beginning of COVID, a tweet going by that I cannot source of someone saying, if you've never kept a journal before, keep a journal of your daily life under COVID, because future scholars will want to know what life was like. Like that there was this ask that we create the records so that future generations can understand what this kind of blur of 6 months has been. And so I'm curious if you've done things specifically to try to remember. Do either of you keep a daily journal, a diary? Do you have a way of keeping a written calendar that you can look back on and remember how this time was spent? Rabbi Marantz, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Rabbi Zedek.
I have the privilege and responsibility every week through preaching and teaching to collect my thoughts about many things. And so one thing that's clear in my writings, I wouldn't say that I journal specifically, but I write a lot. And I have a huge reservoir of writings online, which in a way serve as a diary. I don't write that diary intentionally, but I think de facto, it allows me to keep track of the curses and blessings of this moment. There are many reflections on this unusually virulent pandemic and the profound loss of life that has marked this time, the precipitous economic decline, the existential loneliness. I'm very much in touch with those curses, as well as the blessings that accompany this moment too. Our resilience and creativity, powerful human spirit, the heroism of healthcare professionals and researchers, and so many others who have made sacrifices to keep society afloat during this quarantine. And what about the new moral awakening and sharpened ethical imagination around matters of racial injustice, excessive police force, the rise of anti-racism, and so many of us staying in this precious and transformative fight consistently over time, making life matter. These are things that I've been writing about a lot. And I think it's part of this power of storytelling that's crucial. So if one doesn't commit intentionally to a diary, then find another way in which we can capture, or each of us individually can capture this moment, its curses, its blessings, whatever makes it matter.
Yeah, I'm a 2-wall calendar person. I like to have this month and next month up on my wall. And so what I was tracking at the beginning was just occasional outings out of the house where I was like, Thai food, grocery store.
Up the mail today.
Yes. So Rabbi Zedek, what about you? Have you created a record of this time, or how do you think you'll remember this time?
For whatever reason, and I'm not necessarily sure I know why, the question recalled for me a comment attributed to a colleague of Rabbi Shaman's generation, who was also, like him, a past president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, Rabbi Jerome Molino. And Rabbi Molino was very fond of a suggestion: can people drink deeply when an empty cup is passed around? And one of the things I've been very much aware of is that the peculiar opportunity of being restrained in my normal day-to-day is I've been reading books that I claimed I was going to read but never was going to get around to unless. That's A. B, I've been doing some teaching and been so fascinated by the whole Zoom experience, which seems to have increased people's participation. Maybe it's the hunger for connection. C, I don't like talking on the telephone, and I find myself frequently not letting people go even after we've gotten the business done because of the hunger for that additional connection in our lives. As to the specific of the question, I've had a habit for many, many years, not written, but an oral investigation, and then I'll talk about the written piece. Before I go to bed, I engage in what tradition calls a cheshbon hanefesh, an inventory of the soul, especially noteworthy for this time of year. And I have my rabbi cap on, metaphorically at least. I have 4 questions that I ask myself about the day every day. And if the answer to any one of those questions is no, I'm not ready for bed because I haven't done my work for the day. And so as long as I went down this route, the questions are, did I see something beautiful? Did I hear something beautiful? Did I say something beautiful? And did I do something beautiful? And there's got to be a response to those 4 questions, no matter what the circumstances of my life may be at that particular moment. As to a written response, not so much a record or a diary or a chronology, but for some reason, maybe it's because as one visits doctors with greater regularity at a certain point in life, I wrote what I thought might serve someday, I hope it's a long way off, as my eulogy. Now, that's a way of concretely suggesting that this time is not a time when you can avoid confronting limits. And ironically, it started forming in my head the last time I taught Rabbi Schaalman's class at Emanuel, which was, I guess, March 14. That was the last class. And as I was going home on Lakeshore Drive, an image hit me that led to my writing what I consider, and then rewriting and then reshaping what I hope is the point of my life.
That reminds me of Rabbi Schaalman's second to last Yom Kippur sermon. When his final sermon was when he said he'd had a vision of his father, and his father had said, "That's enough." Right? Like you're done giving sermons. But he gave a beautiful sermon to explain why he no longer was giving sermons. But the year before that, I think, was the year that he stood up there and talked about how he didn't expect to be judged against the merits of Moses, but against the merits of Herman Schaalman. And he essentially gave his eulogy as a Yom Kippur sermon. And it is, I think, one of the great honors of my life as a Jew to have been in the room for that sermon. It was so powerful. And it was the one year where he didn't also implore those of us of childbearing age to have babies.
Yeah, I remember, if you're not surprised, if we're talking about the same particular comments, I heard a despair in his comments that day. And as though it were a life that didn't make impacts. And I remember getting up and I remember being overwhelmed. I'm crying. You're wrong. You're just simply wrong. And hopefully we're always wrong in that way for all of us.
Reflecting on Rabbi Schaalman's Yom Kippur sermons, this next question, and then we're going to move into listening to a clip from Rabbi Levy, which is, how will we make it all matter? How do we make this, it's been 6 months. I assume we have at least another 6 months of this COVID compressed life that we're in. But how can we make this moment in time matter? Rabbi Zedek, I'll start with you, and then I'll have Rabbi Marantz close this question out.
Earlier today, the day we're recording, I happened to be on an interview for the Chicago Humanities Festival with Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, who has a new book coming out on morality. He referred to a previous book of his where he talked about the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism, he suggests, in my words, is a passive notion without necessarily any evidence. Hope, however, is an action required step, or you can't possibly be captured by it. And then he went on, point out, to be a Jew is to have no reason for optimism, but it is assuredly to be captured by hope. That's where I think we all have to respond, not only because I think that's the Jewish approach, but because it's the only way to make our lives more than a sentence to endure. And, I know we're going to be referring to a phrase in the notion of Rabbi Schaalman's reflection, Chadesh Yameinu Kakedem, renew our days as in an earlier time. Well, what was the key to as in that earlier time for the renewal? If it wasn't the notion that we have today and we must strive to make tomorrow more, better, something that is a piece of continuity for all.
Rabbi Marantz, when I ask you, how will we make it all matter? What comes to mind?
Mine is very complimentary of yours in the sense that I refer to one of my favorite novels of all time, Great Expectations. And in this novel, Charles Dickens names suffering as one of our strongest teachers. And I agree. In addition, I also believe, as Rabbi David Wolpe has taught me, that we must do whatever possible to make our losses matter in whatever form they've taken, be it a loss of a loved one to COVID-19, a loss of our own health to the coronavirus, a loss of a job, loss of our normalcy, whatever. And by making these losses matter, they don't merely stand as tragedies that have bent and broken us, but perhaps they become a builder in our lives that builds us all back better, into better shape, into a better reality. That is our opportunity. And for sure, it requires more than optimism. It requires hope and it requires faith.
So we're going to move into reflecting on a clip of one of Rabbi Levy's sermons. So for those of you listening who may be wondering, who are they talking about? Rabbi Felix Levy was ordained at Hebrew Union College in 1907. HUC is the seminary of the Reform movement. And he came to Emanuel Congregation in 1908, where he served until his retirement in 1955. If you've been on the second floor of our synagogue and looked at the confirmation photos, you'll see so many photos of Rabbi Levy through the years with our confirmands. And those are in front of the building we used to be in on Buckingham. Rabbi Levy also served as the president of the Conference of American Rabbis, which is now known as the Central Conference of American Rabbis. He served in that role from 1935 to 1937 and was a key driver of the Columbus platform for the Reform movement. You can access the full Columbus platform online, and it served as a guide to the progressive elements of Judaism. It was written before the Holocaust and before the founding of the State of Israel. So I think keep that in mind when you read the Columbus platform. And then when you're thinking about how Rabbi Shaman and Rabbi Levy overlap, Rabbi Shaman came to Cincinnati from Germany in 1935, which is well into Rabbi Levy's service at Emanuel, and during his first year as president of the Conference of Rabbis. And then Rabbi Levy was Rabbi Emeritus when Rabbi Shaman was serving at Emanuel. So with that brief introduction, I want to share this clip from Rabbi Levy's sermon.
I say, nevertheless, there is a profound truth in what these stories try to tell, and what each particular adventure, perhaps, tries to portray. For example, the plague that we read about a moment ago, that of the thick darkness that was thrown upon the land of Egypt. Lo ro'u ish es ochi, ulachol b'nei Yisroel hoya oer b'moshmo son. No man, that's among the Egyptian, could see the face of his brother or his neighbor's face. And in the houses of the children of Israel, on the other hand, there was light. This difference between the darkness of Egypt and the light of Israel is a favorite theme for most of our writers. It has even come into the treasury of the English language, so that we speak very frequently of the Egyptian darkness whenever we want to characterize something as reactionary or as backward or as living in complete ignorance. While on the other hand, the light that Israel had in its habitation is more or less, again, typical of what the Jew at least thought that Israel stood for. If on the one hand, Egypt was represented darkness, unprogressiveness, on the other hand, Israel symbolized the light and what we would call forward-looking attitudes. Now, light is a favorite theme in the Bible. Perhaps all people think about light in an awesome way. It's perhaps the greatest mystery that exists. And even though moderns may attempt to explain ultimately what light is, or at least they try to tell us how it can act, it still remains one of the grandest, if not the very grandest, secrets that the universe possesses. So that when the Jew made Judaism or his own people synonymous with light, he did so not only deliberately because light meant so much, but on the other hand, he felt that in contrast to all the other peoples of earth, there was something that resembled light in the Jewish attitudes as well as in the Jewish outlook. Creation's first act, God's first act, was light. And God saw the light, and the light was good. Without light, there can be no creation. The very first step in doing anything is light, or as we might say, is understanding. Before you can achieve anything, you must somehow or other understand what you are trying to do.
We've just listened to this remarkable preservation of one of Rabbi Levy's Rosh Hashanah sermons. And so, Rabbi Marantz, there are so many ways to look at his sermon and what he brings to us. But I'm curious, when you listen to this and you reflect on the question, who will be a light in the darkness? What comes to mind?
There's such a truth to the power of being a light in the darkness. Whether Torah is a system of folktales, a mythology, factual, truthful, however we want to define it, there is a powerful and enduring purpose that comes out of Rabbi Levy's voice and his words that is worth listening to in our time, namely because Rabbi Levy, if you look at him as a text person, as Rabbi Heschel spoke of, as a person who conveys a certain purpose, meaning, light in his own life, here is a man who, along with his community, lived through some of the darkest moments of the human soul, who lived through raging storms of human experience. And through it all, he's still trying to find the light, whether it's factual or it's a function of hope and faith. For him, it's true. Remember, Rabbi Levy lived through World War I and the Spanish flu and the Great Depression and World War II and the Shoah. And here he is writing, we think towards the end of his career, perhaps in the 50s, made references to the Eisenhower administration, John Foster Dulles, the Russians, and he's talking about our Passover story, our most seminal myth, our most central story. And specifically, Rabbi Levy's talking about the ninth plague of darkness, a soulless, godless darkness, despite which our ancestors were able to shine their redeeming light through this blackness. And so here is a model. Here is a sage helping us try to figure out how we can understand our own storytelling, however ancient. Right? He's going back into the past so that he can push his community to the future with the hope and faith that they too can be a light in the darkness. And so he talks about Torah as Torah Ora, light of Torah. And we as a Jewish people embrace that light. And he talks about the Jewish people as an Or LaGoyim, a light unto the nations, that we have a call. Since that moment of darkness, that primordial darkness, we have a call to be that light into the nations and to propel ourselves forward with Ora Torah, the light of Torah. Now, what's interesting, if we look at this piece of writing and we look at other pieces of writing, Rabbi Levy worries that we've lost our romance with some of these redemptive capacities. We've lost our ability to have hope and faith in things that we're not quite sure are true, maybe folk tales, but we've become too rational. We've become too skeptical to believe that we can, in fact, be the Or LaGoyim, the light into the nations, that we take our Or HaTorah, the light of Torah in our hearts and souls, and propel ourselves forward, or better yet, erect a bridge between the world as it is and the world as it should be. This is the messianic dream that Rabbi Levy so much wanted us to embrace, despite our rational growth, despite the power of scientific skepticism. He was a very spiritual person and wanted us to rediscover that light in the darkness. So here's the real clincher for me. Rabbi Levy, in a different sermon about rainbows, said that we have a habit of driving everything of imaginary beauty out of our lives. As such, we don't have things like rainbows. So one thing that Rabbi Levy emphasized about rainbows is that we don't really think they exist. In other words, a rainbow is simply the refraction of light by the prismatic raindrop into the elementary colors. Yet none of us would deny the beauty of a rainbow. None of us, when we meet a rainbow, would deny its reality. What brings more calming hope after a terrible storm? So he doesn't suggest that we try to make the world better with rainbows and butterflies and the like. But like Rabbi Sachs would say over 100 years later, no Jew is complete without this hope, an optimistic hope, but also a faithful hope. And so with that rainbow in view that comes out after a terrible storm, and with the notion that we can be a light in the darkness and that we can spread the light of Torah into the world, what could be more worthwhile in achieving hope? And what could be more worthwhile than striving for a day when all humankind can issue forth from this arc of darkness, these stormy seas of uncertainty? What could be better, not only at combating superstition, but also bigotry and hatred and prejudice? And what would be better at cultivating this messianic light and propelling us all into that light, where we would live in a world where there's no hatred and no ill will and no unkindness and no cruelty and no barbarity? These are powerful words coming from Rabbi Levy. And he wants us to feel a certain romance for these possibilities, a romance for this tale of Torah, this light of Torah that we embrace and that we propel into the whole world, one that is filled with all peoples and all colors and all creeds. And if we could author such a narrative, if we could continue to author such a narrative, we could continue to add to such a powerful story, and we will do our part to bring that messianic era, which sometimes feels ephemeral like a rainbow, maybe even impossible, but is not impossible, because if we act as a collective force for good with the light of Torah as a Or LaGoyim, we will make a difference. So this is our charge. Feels like we could use it today, can't we?
A footnote to Rabbi Marantz's impassioned commentary. First, forgive a pun. How is it that while there was darkness that covered the land of Egypt, yet there was light where the Hebrews dwelt? And of course, the childish response is because they turned on the Israelites. Okay, never mind. Thank you, Leah. That's very deep.
You're welcome.
I don't know if they're folk tales or reality, but this much I'm confident of. The plagues are metaphor, and there's nothing more powerful, and there's nothing more debatable, and there's nothing more confusing than metaphor. But there's an exquisite expression of that in rabbinic commentaries when it suggests that the darkness that covered Egypt was as thick as a gold dinar, a unit of currency, that it was not sandstorm or the blotting of the sun. It was rather the blindness of materialism that blinds us to the needs of each other and the willingness to reach out to the other. That's still deeply necessary, and it probably is among the most compelling reasons why we need communities to come together, synagogues, communities of faith of all orders. Richard Leakey of the famous anthropology family once was asked an absolutely absurd question. can you summarize everything you've learned in one sentence, which seems to me to be a very strange idea, no less so than perhaps your challenging podcasts on what's your favorite thing and so on and so forth. But rather than saying kind of idiotic question is that, or as the president might say, that's a dumb question, he responded seriously. He said, what I've learned is one monkey is no monkey. We live in communities or we do not survive. We certainly don't thrive. And the Talmud puts it very forthrightly, o cheruta o metuta. Give me colleagues, friends, connections, or give me the only thing I have, which is death.
You know, Rabbi Marantz and I were interviewed for the Always Andersonville podcast. And something I've said there and at our annual meeting, I say it a lot, which is that I do think it is Judaism's insistence on community is the thing that keeps me from slipping into just total nihilism in this time. That we have a religion that says in order to properly grieve, in order to say Kaddish, you must be in community. That in your darkest days, we have a tradition that forces us to be with people. And I think being a part of a tradition that puts community in the forefront, in the forefront of our Torah, of our personal Torah, to me really means a lot. That I am able to serve the Emanuel Congregation as a tech captain. I think the work I've done as a tech captain is more important than the work of governance of our board of trustees, because I'm helping ensure that we are together while we're apart. I do think that, can you say it again, the Havruta Otuta?
O Havruta O Metuta.
Thank you. We'll make sure to include that in the...
It's Aramaic, so the reason that few and far between are the people who speak Aramaic now. Although in Chicago, we have more Aramaic speakers than most places. You know, Leah, your comment suggests in my own head, the very notion of needing community is why so many communal organizations are in so much trouble, even as they are so much demonstrably needed, because we have an ailment and we're unsure how to break out of that isolation, which is why we need such communities like Emanuel all the more.
We're going to shift gears and talk a little bit about Rabbi Shaman. For those who did not have the honor of knowing him during his life, Rabbi Shaman came to the United States in 1935 to attend HUC in Cincinnati, and he came to Emanuel Congregation as our senior rabbi in 1956. I'll say he served as senior rabbi until his retirement in 1986. He served our community until his death in 2017. Rabbi Shaman established the Olin Singh Ruby Union Institute, known more popularly as Azrui, which is the summer camp that so many of our members call home. And he was a leader in making material changes in interfaith relations through his partnership and relationship with Cardinal Bernardin. So like Rabbi Levy before him, Rabbi Schaalman served as a president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis from 1981 until 1983. And he was a key figure in bringing acceptance and recognition of patrilineal descent to the Reform movement. I was always grateful to be present for his Yom Kippur sermons. And we're going to share a clip from this is the last Yom Kippur sermon he gave as senior rabbi. So please enjoy this clip.
Kadesh Yomeinu. We will renew our days, kekedem in the spirit of those who once before did it for us, and who bequeathed to us not merely breaking stones, but that faith that said, here is Emmanuel, here God is with us, here we make our stand, here we will play our part, here we will be that people of God, that splinter of the worldwide community of Jews that is called Emmanuel. And so the ancient Midrash was right. Renewal is part of life. The universe cannot exist without it. The world, the Jewish people, cannot exist without it. And we as Emanuel cannot exist without it. On the contrary, the true turning, the true understanding of this day's message Adei, your name is Kekedem. As once they did for us, so shall we do for others. As we were given, so we shall transmit and in turn give ourselves. For it is not only they who preceded us who have the faith. It is surely also we their children and grandchildren, we their successors, we to whom the past falls here and now. For surely the question is put to us as it is at every time and to everyone. Where are you in this world? And surely we shall say, as did those before us, in any, here we are. Amen.
Rabbi Zedek, I'll turn to you. You were one of Rabbi Schaalman's successors after his second retirement. So I'm sure you knew him before you came to Emanuel.
He's among the principal reasons that I was interested in coming to Emanuel.
You hear this clip and reflect on a mentor and a colleague, and I know a dear friend, who will be a source of sustainability and renewal as we move forward. And what are your reflections on this sermon?
I mentioned a little earlier my deconstruction of Chadei Shimenu Kedem, so I won't go back there for the moment, but I do want to make an aside and then respond more directly. The aside is, as I'm hearing the conclusion, or as they used to call it in homiletics class, the sockdologer, give him a rousing conclusion of this sermon, I'm reminded of a number of things, including that he always spoke without a note, and he always spoke without an or an ah, and it reads poetically. It just reads magnificently as I'm looking at the text, and as others will hear it via the ear for sure. That said, yes, I just want to add an aspect of Rabbi Schaalman's convictions that may not be as well known as this afal pi shein. Despite everything, we still must move forward together to make a better community, a better world, because Emanuel, God is with us. And that is, he was devoted to the notion that Chicago had a certain unique quality, that Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah, also from out of Zion shall come forth Torah, Ki Mi Chicago, also, that because of some peculiarity of Midwestern affability and conviction, that problems can be solved, that right-thinking people can come together, we will be a model for a sustainably optimistic, future-oriented community. And he kept that alive to his very end. And I'm grateful that I could hear him and say it and embody it. And I'm also grateful that I get to share it. He was a brand plucked from the fire who always understood that meant we have an obligation to make a difference for as long as the breath of life resides in us. I mean, what more could one say?
Rabbi Marantz, did you have any thoughts?
I thought Rabbi Shaman was very clear on the responsibility that we have in our current generation to look at the wisdom, to look at the legacy, to look at the contributions of our predecessors, not because we have to go back in time and preserve things exactly the way they were, but we go back in time to learn how they managed through challenge, how they marked their blessings, how they gave gratitude for their legacy institution, so that we might learn from their example and renew it and refresh it and bring it forward with us. It's like going back to the future. We go back into the past, but really with the idea of pulling the most salient and inspiring wisdom and carrying it forward into the future, a future that is uncertain. But both these men, Zichronam Lebracha, may their memories be for a blessing, both these amazing rabbis and their equally amazing communities created a blueprint upon which we can figure out how we're going to not only survive, but thrive and flourish going forward into this uncertainty. They did it. And we can have the confidence because they did it that we can too. And I'm really proud of their legacy, and I'm honored to help you, Leah, and our lay leaders and Rabbi Zedek and all those who succeeded these two amazing rabbis and everybody else who has served our community for 141 years. Everyone counts, everyone matters. We wouldn't be here without everybody's contributions. So to bear witness to those contributions as a way of saying thank you for showing us the way, we can say in a spiritual sense to Rabbis Levy and Schaalman and all the preceding generations, thank you for this gift. And thank you for the blessings that will enable us to move through the curses of our lives and to somehow build ourselves better because of the wisdom. That is our opportunity. That is our responsibility.
Rabbi Marantz's reflection reminded me of an exquisite story of a rabbi who succeeded his father in the pulpit, and he's criticized for making all kinds of changes, innovations, and new ideas into the community. And he says that you're wrong. I do exactly as my father did. Just as he innovated, I innovate.
Amen.
And we have a rich legacy of responding to the moment with convictions from the past to energize the future.
Amen ve'amen. Chadesh yameinu kegedem.
Not a bad conclusion.
Rabbi Schaalman, Rabbi Levy before him were groundbreakers. We are a legacy institution because they were able to break ground when necessary and to change the way things were done. I'm really proud of both rabbis' legacies. There's much I can say. I want to speak specifically to Rabbi Levy and his work on the Columbus platform, which tilted the Reform movement towards a clear Zionist stance. It took a while for the movement and all rabbis to be more Zionist and more committed to Ahavat Zion, the love of Israel. But Rabbi Levy was a pioneer, a groundbreaking pioneer in this respect, and talking about carrying that legacy forward and creating an ethical will, not only based on love of Israel, but love of Torah and being a Jewish leader. He influenced his granddaughter, Nama Kelman Ezrahi, to become a rabbi, the first woman ordained in Israel. That is huge, a huge groundbreaking moment in the extended Levy family. And we thank Rabbi Levy in part for planting that seed. Nama did all of the work, really, but I'm sure she really appreciates. I know she appreciates, he told me.
Well, it's a rich family legacy, including her brother, who's the founding rabbi of Kol Neshama in Jerusalem, and Felix Levy's son-in-law, who was the executive director of the Rabbinical Association, the RA.
So not only did Nama catch the vibe, but so did their daughter. So Rabbi Levy's and Mrs. Levy's, Cecilia Levy's granddaughter, became a rabbi too, in the 100th class of Israeli ordained Reform rabbis. By the way, not to be outdone, I would like to pay homage to Rabbi Shaman, without whom I probably would not have become a rabbi. Now, he doesn't know this, but the fact that he was a primary architect and inventor of Jewish summer camping here in the United States, and thanks to his close relationship with one of my rabbis, Alfred Wolf of blessed memory, who invented another camp on the West Coast. But after Herman had established with Rabbi Lorge Asrui, Owen Sang Ruby, my rabbi, Alfred Wolf, inspired by Rabbi Schaalman and summer camping that they knew and loved from Germany, my camp S. Kramer was founded Gindling Hilltop Camp also. And I was privileged to go to both places, and it's in these hallowed places on this sacred ground that I learned really to love Judaism and to channel that love into building sacred community and pursuing Or HaTorah, the light of God, and Torah, and being an Or LaGoyim, a light into the nations, and helping others. So my heartfelt gratitude to Rabbi Schaalman, Rabbi Levy, their families. Emanuel is standing on solid, sacred ground, thanks to their 20th century impact, and in Rabbi Schaalman's case, 21st century as well.
Rabbi Marantz, great. Did you ever share that piece? I assume you did, that piece of information about the camp connection with Rabbi Shaman?
I did.
How did he respond?
Michael, you're probably aware of this. Leah, you might be too. I schlepp his mail over.
Yeah.
I thought that was a reasonable thing to do. And it was a great way to connect with him. And he asked me all sorts of questions. He was, as you know, profoundly curious. For a man as brilliant and as knowledgeable and well-read and well-studied, he was always curious about what other people were doing and learning. And I think it's what made it so easy to study with him. So he would ask me lots of questions, and I would be happy to answer. And I did a number of occasions, even before I moved here. When I met him at Olin Sang Ruby, I told him about Rabbi Wolf, his good friend from Germany, who came over here thanks to Rabbi Beck, and with other rabbis, of course, the Big Five. And he was proud to know that I was connected with Alfred, and of course, that I was able to go to camp. And I thanked him.
Great. The other thing that comes to mind, which may have a more immediate gravity to our discussion today, is if one assumes that the Columbus platform was a new vector in understanding liberal Jewish life, and if one understands that the whole remarkable transformation that Jewish camping introduced into the vigor of Jewish life, what are the opportunities that are uniquely in this present moment? And one of the things that I suspect, and I'm more than willing to be wrong, is that the intimate and inspiring energy that came out of those experiences is somehow leading us to these kinds of technologies in new ways for renewal. That it means greater access, it means greater flexibility, it means more opportunities for Torah learning of all sorts, even as I hope it will also mean that when we can return to whatever the new normal looks like, there'll be more of a desire for the direct interface as opposed to this more virtual form of direct interface. But I suspect the tech is the key here.
From your mouth to God's ears, I pray that we have a chance to interface with one another. So the clips that we listen to reflect in the two rabbis a desire to have us look within our own souls as a light to the nations, as an Or LaGoyim, within our own congregation, as a place where we can go back to earlier generations with a sense of gratitude, with a sense of respect for what they created and how they set us up for success. So on one level, these great rabbis, these groundbreaking rabbis, are very much about what we need to do within the framework of our community. Emanuel Congregation, Emanuel, God is with us. We have work to do within. At the same time, both of these groundbreaking rabbis were also outward facing. So when we talk about creating a new vector in Reform Judaism around things like love of Israel and the establishment of a Jewish state, that is an outward-facing, groundbreaking moment. When we think about a legacy of Jewish camping that doesn't just happen at 5959 North Sheridan, happens at Olin Sang Ruby, Camp Hess Kramer, Gindling Hilltop Camp, the many, many Reform camps that are in the movement. Right? These are groundbreaking legacies that emanated out of 5959 North Sheridan. And so it seems to me that our legacy going forward, particularly during these uncertain times, is to do both. Do whatever we can to strengthen our sense of hope and purpose so that we can remain cohesive and true and authentic as a congregation with whom God resides, but also outward facing, making the world around us better in some unique and special way. It won't be in creating the state of Israel. Rabbi Levy helped there. It won't be in creating Jewish summer camping. Rabbi Shaman made a difference there. We can certainly support both. But in terms of our own groundbreaking creative legacy, what are we going to build? Well, we have a lot of opportunities ahead of us, whether it's the Blue House Initiative or something else we dream up. Whatever rainbows we search for that will give us a reason to be hopeful and faithful about the future. I pray that we discover them, and I pray that we appreciate them. And if there's any legacy that we take from Rabbi Schaalman and Rabbi Levy about our past, is that we know how to survive, and we know how to thrive, and we know how to flourish, and we know how to dream and make our dreams come true. So let us keep finding a way together to dream and to build and to change the world.
Rabbi Marantz, Rabbi Zedek, thank you for joining me this afternoon for this conversation. A couple things to point people to. We've talked a lot about the Columbus platform of 1937, which you can find easily online. It's when you search for Rabbi Levy, it's one of the top hits, but we will link to it as well. But as I've been looking through this, because I don't think I've ever read the Columbus platform before, but under a description of Torah, which I think is something that we can take forward. The Torah, both written and oral, enshrines Israel's ever-growing consciousness of God and the moral law. As a depository of permanent spiritual ideals, the Torah remains the dynamic source of the life of Israel. Each age has the obligation to adapt the teachings of the Torah to its basic needs in consonance with the genius of Judaism. And I think that is something that can speak to us from 1937, which is that, we read the Torah every year on a cycle, and we revisit each parsha with a new year of experience in our own life, and we turn it again, and there's always another interpretation to the Torah portion, but also that our personal Torah, our Torah, is a dynamic source of life. And it can be hard to remember that it is a dynamic living document. And I think as we look at the future of Emanuel Congregation, we need to remember that the Torah itself is a dynamic source for us, and that we can carry that forward. I think we're at an exciting time in the life of our congregation. They always say the second 140 years.
They do. They always say that.
It's a common phrase. It's in Aramaic, so
there you go.
Harder to remember. But thank you for spending this afternoon with me. It has really been a treasure.
What a pleasure it has been. Shana Tova U'Metuka to you both, to your families, to our entire community. A good and sweet year to one and all.
Amen. So.
This podcast was produced by Leah Jones and Amy Guth. Archival audio remastering by Bob Ferguson.